Welcome back. My name is Christoph. I told you all about the wooden boat I'm building and the first steps of lofting and making the strong back. In this episode, it's all about the core building materials for the hull and how I fabricated the first permanent members of the hull, the floors and the keelson, also from scratch. One discussion I had with the designer was what kinds of wood are suitable for the core parts of the hull, like the floors, which are the cross members, the longitudinals, like the stringers and keelboard, the inner and outer stem, and eventually the strip planking. Choosing the right lumber for boat building can be puzzling. Deciding for a suitable species of wood depends on many things, like the construction method, the type of boat, cost, and of course, availability. The species I settled for and was approved by the designer is European larch. It has similar qualities to the specified white cedar, and most importantly, it is readily available to me. Once the right kind of wood is found and obtainable, the boat builder is dealing with raw lumber from the sawmill. This opens up many possibilities as for choosing the right stock, but at the same time demands at least some knowledge about which parts of a log have the right features for building the hull. Which parts are going to be structural, that means load-bearing members of the hull. Which parts are going to be submerged in water and which parts are not. Looking for the right beam or board to make load-bearing parts for the hull out of means you want what's called quartered lumber. If you think of a board and you look at a section of it, you want to see annual rings that are perpendicular to the sawn face of the board. As opposed to the slab sawn board where the rings go from side to side, the quartered board or beam can take much larger bending forces, which is what you want in, for example, a plank. What you've been seeing me do here is the first steps of building the cross members of the hull, the so-called floors. This is not to be confused with the actual floor of the boat on which you walk and stand. The floors here are rather the foundations on which the soul is set onto. Much more importantly, the floors play a critical role in the overall concept of this glued composite hull construction. Because there are no frames, rigidity against twisting and bending forces solely have to be provided from the cross-lamination of the veneers and the permanent fastening of the longitudinals, which are the stringers, shear planks and keelboard, with the cross members, the floors. I decided oak to be the species of choice for the floors. You see me here preparing flitches of 2-inch oak. I first trace out rough shapes of the floors from stations 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 7, 8, and 9.5, which I took off the lofting I showed you in episode 1. I made sure to draw outside of the heart, which is the center part of the log, and inside of the sapwood, which is the live part of the tree. You remember the paper molds I made from the lofting in episode 1. Here I'm transferring rough shapes from the mold onto a piece of oak. Much more than the actual outline of the floor, I'm interested in the information of the center line, which I need to align the paper mold properly. A window in the paper mold makes this process easy. The second set of information from the lofting is the exact position of the inner set of longitudinals, the stringers. The finishing step before returning to the setup is drilling large diameter holes in the lowest part of the floor, where the inner keelboard intersects. Water that collects in the bilge and is trapped in one of the floor compartments usually leads to rot. The so-called limber holes provide for the water to move freely from either end of the hull into the lowest point of the bilge, where a bilge pump will dispose of it. After offering the roughly shaped floor to the setup, I use a straight edge with a cutout to transfer bevel angles from the next station further forward onto the floor. From here it's better to work with hand tools, that is a rasp, a hand plane and a batten, to shape the sides of the floor into a compound curve that lets the plank lay perfectly flat on the contact surface. This process can be very tedious and time-consuming. It's rather unpleasant having to undo a mistake from taking off too much material. Once the beginning steps of setting up and preparing stock materials are accomplished, the compound curves or rolling bevels, as they are called, are becoming a major part of boat building, at least in hull construction. So let's see if we can get the inner keelboard out of this beautiful oak board, which is roughly the right thickness already. So I'll give it a try. So this turned out really nice, I would say. Nice clean cut. The inner keelboard, or keelson, is next on my list. In the plans, the keelson is fastened to the floors. Both make up the backbone of the hull, so to speak. Again, because of its strength and availability, I chose quarter-sawn oak to cut the parts for the keelson out of. Because of its required length, I had to fabricate two separate pieces and glue them together. To maximize the strength of the connection, the two pieces had to be scarfed. Other than in a butt joint, where end grain simply meets end grain, in a scarf joint, the grain meets at an angle and provides a greater contact surface. Cutting the scarf, it's recommended to make the length of the scarf at least 6 times its thickness. You can see me laying and fastening the two pieces I want to connect on top of each other. Then I mark out the scarf as described and cut grooves roughly down to the line with a handsaw. With a wood chisel I chip away the bulk of the material. I finish the scarf with an electric plane, a hand plane, and eventually with a belt sander. Join me next time when I tell you all about how I built the inner stem of this lobster boat. This involved the first use of epoxy and laminating in order to make a lofted line into the beautifully shaped front end of the boat. Welcome back. My name is Christoph. I told you all about the wooden boat I'm building, and the first steps of lofting and building the building, basically. In this episode, it's all about the core. Welcome back. My name is Christoph, and I told you all the. Welcome back. My name is Christoph, and I told you all about the wooden boat I'm building and all that stuff. Welcome back. And first, welcome back. My name is Christoph, and I told you all about the wooden boat I'm building, and in the first 2 episodes, all this stuff that happened, all that. I told you all about the wooden boat I'm building, and I'm building the first steps of lofting and the strung back and everything, you know.